You know how it goes. The moment anyone brings up tank design disasters, everybody points straight at the German Maus, or Hitler's dream of building a land battleship. But if you think the Germans had a monopoly on bad ideas, then friend, you clearly haven't met the British school of tank design. These guys built machines like war wasn't a battle at all, more like a very particular gentleman's club with very particular rules. A tank with the gun pointing backwards, coming right up. A vehicle the size of a two-story house, still fighting the last war in the mud of 1916? Easy. A gun that fires not shells but flying garbage cans? Yep. That happened too. Today on Great Evolution, we're counting down the top 5 weirdest tanks Britain ever built. And I'm not talking about drawings that gathered dust in a filing cabinet. Every single one of these actually rolled into combat and smelled real gunpowder. Why did they turn out this strange? And was there any method to the madness? Let's dig in. Let's start with one that honestly looks like a joke. Meet the Archer. If you ever saw this thing on the battlefield and it started driving away from you, don't relax. It's actually lining up a shot right between your eyes. So what's the deal? The British took the chassis of the Valentine tank and decided to bolt on a powerful 17-pounder gun. Problem was, the gun was so enormous it wouldn't fit in a normal turret. Their solution? Stick it in an open compartment and point the barrel backwards toward the rear of the vehicle. Why on earth would you do that? Believe it or not, it was genius. The Archer was built for ambushes. It would back into position, take its shot, and the second things got hot, the driver didn't have to waste time turning around. He'd just drop it into first gear and floor it out of there. The one catch? Whenever the gunner had a target lined up, the driver literally had to duck down or climb out of the vehicle entirely because the gun's recoil would come slamming right through the spot where he was sitting. Lean the wrong way and you'd become part of the interior decor. If the Archer was weird but effective, the Covenanter is basically a monument to how not to design a cooling system. On paper, it was a fast, sleek, good-looking cruiser tank, but then some engineer had a bright idea. Let's put the radiators up front and the engine in the back, which meant pipes full of scalding hot coolant ran the entire length of the tank, right through where the crew sat. The result? The inside of this thing was hotter than hell. Crews were basically cooking alive. And here's the kicker, they were meant to fight in North Africa. So the Covenanter earned a unique distinction. It's the only tank in history declared unfit for combat because of the weather. It never left home. They only used it for training units back in Britain, because out in the desert, it would boil over on its own after about 15 minutes of driving. Take a look at the early Crusader. See that little bump sticking out the front? That's a machine gun sub-turret. In theory, brilliant. The tank rolls forward while a dedicated gunner hoses down enemy infantry. In practice, a nightmare. That little turret was so cramped and so poorly ventilated that the gunners kept passing out from the gun fumes. On top of that, cutting a hole for it actually weakened the hull's armor. So in later versions, the British just chopped the whole thing off and welded a plain steel plate over the hole. Lesson learned. One decent tank beats a tank with a useless attachment bolted to the front, getting in the way of the actual fighting. If you thought the British were all tea and politeness, let me introduce you to the Churchill AVRE. This was a demolition tank built on one simple philosophy. If the wall won't fall down, we just don't have a big enough hammer. After the catastrophic Dieppe raid in 1942, the British realized ordinary tank guns were useless against thick concrete bunkers. They needed something that could knock the teeth out of the Atlantic Wall. So they took the heavy Churchill tank, ripped out its standard gun, and mounted a 290mm mortar called the Petard. And here's the crazy part. It spat out an 18-kilogram explosive charge that the troops immediately nicknamed the Flying Dustbin. The effective range was only about 70 to 80 meters, which means the crew had to drive practically nose to nose with an enemy bunker, exposing their sides to fire, just to lob this present at the enemy's front door. But the wildest bit was the reloading. To load another round, the tank had to swing its turret around. The barrel broke open in the middle, and then the co-driver had to pop his hatch, lean half his body out into the bullets and shrapnel, and shove a fresh round into the muzzle by hand. Sounds like a suicide mission, except the Churchill was so ridiculously thick-skinned that it shrugged off almost everything thrown at it. On D-Day in Normandy, these machines became genuine guardian angels for the infantry. One good shot, and a reinforced concrete bunker turned into a pile of rubble. It was crude, dangerous, and completely unscientific, and it worked perfectly. And now, the finale. The king of weird. A machine that makes even the German Tiger look like a compact economy car. Meet the TOG-2. It was designed by the very same engineers who'd built the world's first tanks back in 1916. And in 1940, they decided World War II was going to play out exactly like the last one. Endless lines of trenches, oceans of mud, and barbed wire as far as the eye could see. The product of all that nostalgia was an 80-ton steel monster over 10 meters long. This was basically a land-going armored train, and it didn't even have suspension. The road wheels were bolted rigidly to the hull. Why? Because the engineers figured suspension was just an extra part that would break down in the mud anyway. The most ironic thing? Buried inside this dinosaur was a genuinely advanced piece of tech for its day, an electromechanical transmission. A diesel engine spun a generator which powered electric motors. Essentially, the TOG was a giant hybrid, like a modern Tesla, except it weighed 80 tons, belched smoke like a factory chimney, and topped out at a blistering 13 kilometers per hour. But while these engineers were fussing over their battleship on tracks, the war itself had changed. It had gone lightning fast. Tanks were now breaking through the front and racing hundreds of kilometers into enemy territory. So who, in 1943, needed a haystack the size of a house that would bog down in the first deep puddle and make a perfect target for any German gun? The British War Office took one look at this wonder, politely thanked the designers, and packed the TOG-2 off to a museum. Today, it sits in Bovington, the one tank that doesn't inspire fear, just a single question: what on earth were they thinking? It was a monument to an era that had already ended before it was even finished being built.
British tanks are the story of a country that, under crushing pressure and with barely any time or resources, kept trying to reinvent the wheel and kept ending up with either an Archer or a TOG. But for all their strangeness, most of these machines, with the possible exception of the TOG and the Covenanter, made a huge contribution to the victory in Normandy. They were awkward, they were bizarre, sometimes downright funny, but they got the job done. So which of these do you think is the most insane? Or maybe you know about even stranger projects out there? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe, because this is where we break down the real, verified history of military hardware. See you in the next video.